Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel, Fly Like Me PhD. As you all know, I am Dr. Maya and I encourage Black women to live or travel abroad. Today is a very special day because we have our first feature on our channel. I told y'all this was going to be our bonus video. So I'm really excited for this. As you can tell, it's going to be about Trinidad and Tobago. I also still have my hat on that I got from Carnival, and I'm really excited for our guest today. So I'm going to go ahead and bring her in and let her introduce herself.
Hey, hi, Dr. Maya. Hi, Dr. Maya's friend. How are you doing? My name is Nneka Kelly, and I am a Trinity-born sage and oracle. I help people craft the life that they love. That's it.
So glad to have you here, Nneka, and to get the experience about Trini firsthand as a person that is in the space, moved to the space, lived in the space, all of the things. I think it means a lot when we have people that are actually know a lot about the country more than just as a tourist.
Mm, true, very true.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get started. I know a lot of us like to segue into this, have gone to Trini for a carnival, such as myself.
Mm.
And we sometimes only have knowledge of what Trini is like from the carnival perspective. Could you tell us about country scouting or what it is like outside of carnival season to be in Trini or to even live there?
Okay. Well, maybe a little bit of background. So I grew up in Trinidad. I was born there, raised there. I left permanently when I was 16. So I did not spend my 20s there. I spent my 20s in Miami, I would say, and in college. Um, but a lot of my family is back there, and I've been back a few times since I left. Now, the other day in January, I could say that earlier this year, I went to Trinidad to scout it because I needed, we could talk about this later, but I was looking for a better setup for my parents. And so I went as someone who was from Trinidad but hadn't lived in Trinidad for a very long time, for like 30 years. And so when I went there, I went with that kind of, I'm looking at this place through a lens of can we live here now since we spent a lot of our lives here in the US. And so I knew not to go at Carnival. We went in January, which is, it was 2 months before Carnival. Things were starting to heat up. But really, during Carnival week, which is when a lot of people are, like that's how they experience Trinidad. It's that Carnival Monday and Tuesday, maybe a couple of days before on the weekend, maybe a couple of days after you go for Lima Maracas or you go out to Tobago to rest after Carnival. But I really went there to see what life would be like. I wanted to see what the medical care would be like. I wanted to see how much it was going to cost because we hear a lot about that. And I wanted to get firsthand experience with, whether or not it's as crime ridden as everybody says it is. Who's from there or all the rumors, what people report, what you see in the news. So those three things were the three major things that I was looking for: the medical, the cost of living, and the crime, just to see what that was like.
Yeah, that is really helpful. I'm glad that you got like both perspectives as a person that lived there and then as a person going back there. Do you feel like there were a lot of changes in the space from when you were there, like as a teenager, to like going there as an adult, or did it seem like the same to you?
Some things were the same and some things were very different. So Trinidad, I think I say this to my family a lot. Trinidad is trying, they emulate New York and in later years they emulate Miami. So the downtown, well, not even the downtown area, but around the savannah, you see the big Napa amphitheater there. You have Movie Town now that's kind of like mimicking like the big kind of flashy IMAX movie theater. Even where we stayed, which is number one Woodbrook Place, had the IMAX movie theater down there. There's a lot more fast food. There's a lot more commerce in terms of um, like a Miami life type of commerce. But the way that Trinidad works is the same. And I have some stories about that. Like, so we needed to take care of some business for my dad, and we had to go to get some his life insurance policy was there. So we went to take care of that. And immediately you just fall right back into how Trinidad works. You have to know somebody. You have to, it takes a long time. We spent probably 3 hours there, or 2 to 3 hours there, trying to get this thing resolved, which is still not resolved, by the way. We're still going back and forth. I have to know when to use my Trinidadian accent and when to use my American accent
Wow.
because things work differently for me depending. So some conversations I started off speaking like an American, and they were giving me kind of like a runaround, and I immediately switched back into my Trinidad accent because I wanted them to know that I'm from, like I'm from here. So
Yeah.
don't try to tell me anything about, that. Don't try to give me the runaround. I know what you're doing. So in terms of street food culture, the vibe, the 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 feeling of home, that's still the same. But in terms of infrastructure has changed a lot. A lot for the better. Some of it is just like trying to emulate something that I don't think is worth going after.
Mm,
And also, I think the car culture is a lot bigger there now. Everybody drives around, and I'm not really sure what happened. I'm like, please walk. We're going. We don't have far to go. Just walk. Take a taxi. But everybody owns a car. My cousin was saying that Trinidad has more cars than people now. I find that
wow.
I was like, that's not good. That's a little bit ridiculous. So yeah, some things are the same, and some things are very different, both for positives and for negatives.
I'm pretty
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying completely. Like, there has definitely been a westernization of places in terms of like when you're talking about cars. I find that, in other countries and specific places, like transportation is much better than it is, for example, in the US. And there are specific places like a New York that has good transportation or has subways or like multiple options, but that is not the average. That's not like the typical
Mhm.
thing that you'll find in the US. So I get that completely. You had mentioned that it's kind of like in some ways like a New York or kind of like a Miami. Could you tell us what the cost of living is there?
Well, the cost of living is not like a New York or a Miami, I tell you
Okay,
that.
that's great.
Which
That's
is the positive. So if you want to live like you're living in New York, but you want to pay half the price of living in New York, then you could do that there. If you want to live like on Brickell in Miami, but you don't want to pay Brickell prices in Miami, you could live in Trinidad, say in number one Woodward Place, or even in Bayside Towers, or somewhere along the coast for probably at least half of what you would spend to live in Miami. That's changing also, um, but it's half or less. And then if you want to live like in the suburbs, it's very reasonable as well. The interesting thing, though, I think this happens in all whenever we have the move abroad conversation. For people who live there locally, the cost of living is outrageous for real. It's untenable. Um, But if you're moving, if for a lot of people who are Trinidadian by birth or they have Trinidadian parentage, they can move to Trinidad, use US dollars, and they can live well there, much, 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 much better than they're living in the US with a lot less stress, a lot less stress.
got it. Oh man. That's really complicated, Nneka. That is really complicated in terms of cost. It's so annoying, like housing, so difficult to get across the world for sure. Could you tell us that if a person wanted to move to Trini, they're not from Trini, they don't have family in Trini, what is the housing situation like for expats?
Um, I think it's reasonable for expats. Again, I'm assuming moving from the US to there
Yeah.
to to Trinidad. I think housing is reasonable. It would depend on where you stay, and you would want to stay probably closer to like maybe St. James if you're in the west, Indigo Martin if you're in the west, a lot of Tunapuna, maybe a little bit of Trin City. There are some areas that you would want to avoid because of the crime, which is another thing that we talked about or we discussed earlier. Um, but housing is reasonable from an expat perspective. Now you're still probably gonna pay if you're looking for a two-two, you probably are still gonna pay about 1250 to 1500 US dollars for it. Um yeah, 1250. If you're wanting to live on the high end, it's probably gonna be 2000 US for it.
And is that's a one bedroom?
A two bedroom, two
Two
bath.
bedroom.
So
Two
two
bedroom.
bedroom, two bath, probably from 1250 to 1500 reasonably. If you're staying somewhere like number one Woodbrook Place or again Bayside Towers or somewhere on the it's on in the northwest on the coast, it is gonna be like 2000 plus
Okay.
for that. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, cool. You had mentioned a little bit about crime, and it's really unfortunate that when we talk about moving abroad, that is often a thing that people want to mention or have a conversation about. But since we are here and you had mentioned we had discussed this earlier, could you talk to us a little bit about the crime or what you know about it, what people have told you about it? What was your experience around crime? Is it something that
Mhm.
people should be concerned about?
So while I was there, I felt very safe. That's what I can say on that front. I so I met my Dr. Maya from the Exodus Summit, and I'm in a group from the Exodus Summit, and we're all from the Caribbean. Two of the ladies there told me while I was on the summit, they relayed some anecdote, not even anecdotes or stories, first-hand stories of what happened to their family with crime. So I was very, very concerned about it when I went down. Um, but I didn't I didn't feel it and I didn't experience it. And I have to say that when I went also a couple weeks before I got there, they had instituted a state of emergency. So apparently the government of Trinidad thought that the crime was really bad and the people of Trinidad felt like the crime was really bad. But my experience there didn't feel um like I was in danger or that like I didn't feel like I would be pickpocketed. I didn't feel like anybody well, I didn't have my phone waving out. I don't wear jewelry when I'm there. I don't wear jewelry in general. So I didn't feel like anybody was gonna snatch anything off of me or snatch my phone. I think if you're there as a tourist, people know that you're a tourist. They thought that I was a tourist. So you wanna be aware of how you're moving. And the other part about the crime in Trinidad that I keep hearing I two things. One is I think that when people think that you have money or they think that you come from America or the UK and you come with stuff, the assumption is always that you have money or you have things, then sometimes the crime is inside crime, like a family member tells a friend, and then the friend is the person that perpetrates the crime. That's one thing. And then a lot of the other type of crime in Trinidad is gang related crime. So I heard somebody talk about Mexico. Rashida, I think, was talking about Mexico. She's like, I'm not in a cartel. So the cartels don't bother me. I don't have anything to do with gangs. I don't. I'm not involved in any drug trade. The crime doesn't affect me in that way. Um, but I can't say that the crime does not exist because I know those stories firsthand. And I know that it's affected some people firsthand. I just, my experience has been that I have not had any issues with it. And for the most part, my family has not had any issues with crime, and they live there. Um, my cousin did relay a story to me that was very, very scary, but for the most part, they didn't. There's not an issue. Also, I want to say about the crime that I live in Charlotte, North Carolina here now. I moved here from Miami last year. Within a week of moving here from Miami, the corner 7-Eleven, the clerk shot one of the customers at the corner 7-Eleven. And I live in a very good neighborhood. It's like very high end in an affluent neighborhood. That was on one corner, on one side of the subdivision. On the other side of the subdivision, at the Walgreens, someone drove to the Walgreens after he shot someone, and they were in the car. So I had never experienced anything like that in my entire life ever. And I felt that it was very interesting that I moved to the suburbs of Charlotte in this really good neighborhood. And that was my experience here. Now, I've never had that happen to me in Trinidad. I never had it happen to me in Miami. I tell people I feel like the crime in Trinidad is like crime in Miami. If you're in like Miami in the 80s, how they used to talk about crime then. If you're into drugs and you're in downtown Miami or on the beach, then you're gonna be entangled in some stuff. If the same thing for Trinidad is how I feel. I feel like it's in pockets and maybe could, like kind of contained. But I don't feel like it's pervasive the way that it sounds when people talk about it from outside or even from inside Trinidad. When Trinidadians talk about crime, it sounds pervasive, but when you're there, it doesn't feel pervasive.
Thank you so much for that, Nneka, especially like to give us examples of real life things that happened talking about crime related to the US. I'll speak for this as a US born person, been
Mm-hmm.
here from the beginning. I think that a lot of this is related to the fact that it's very easy to have access to guns in the US. And so then that makes it easy for people to cause a lot of harm to people. And I know in some other countries, the gun laws are like really strict. Like they're not just allowing people to have guns at the age of 18, or like you have to go through a lot in order to be able to own a gun. So that is definitely an issue here that can cause people to, feel harm from gun violence quite often. And I would agree with you. Like, there is going to be crime everywhere that we go. There are specific pockets where there is more crime. There are specific pockets where there is less crime. And in specific places, like you said, abroad, if you're not involved or entangled in something that is like
Mm-hmm.
controversial, then you should be okay. In the same way in the US, right? There's also gang violence in the US. And if we're not in a gang, like maybe we might go our whole lives never even knowing what gang violence is, but that gang violence is very real to some people that are entangled in it. So appreciate you for giving that nuance. And I want to say too, I felt completely safe when I was in Trini. I never felt like I need to look over my shoulder or to be afraid of anything. And I was there for Carnival where there was like hundreds, maybe even thousands of people out there that I don't even know. But I never felt like I was unsafe. So, with that being said, you had already mentioned earlier something about the healthcare. Could you
Mm-hmm.
tell us a little bit more about the healthcare, and then if you could compare it to healthcare in the U.S., if it's better, if it's worse, is it like the same quality? That would be helpful for us to know.
Yeah, I've been thinking about how to talk about this. So I think the US has better medical technology. When I say that, if you have acute issues or persistent issues, I- like if you have cancer, then the US would be the place for you to be. If you have if you have a heart issue and a pacemaker and you need it to be regularly checked or something like that, the US would be the place. Like I would come here to do something like that, right? But when we on this trip, it was a scouting trip, so I'm really glad that it happened there, even though it wasn't a good thing that happened. My mom got really sick. She was throwing up all like the second night that we got there. I think she was excited and she ate a lot, so she was throwing up all of that night. And she was okay the next day, but then the day after that, she started throwing up again, and I was like, okay, so we're taking you to the hospital. So I took her to it in Trinidad. It's called a private hospital, but it's like a medical, it's like an urgent care slash hospital, if you will. There are beds there, so you can stay overnight, but it's more like the place where you can go to get immediate care. So we went to the emergency room. It was across the street from where we were staying, or a few blocks down from where we were staying. So it was very accessible. And I was really amazed at the care that she got there. I was not prepared. I did not think that it was going to be good at all. So they were very thorough. They saw her quickly. She didn't have to wait around to be seen. They were attentive. They were very careful. Um, and the cost, so they ended up doing a chest x-ray. They did a chest CT. They did an abdominal CT, and they did one other thing. I cannot remember. Well, blood work, of course, but they did one other scan, and that came up. All of that plus the doctor's visit, plus they gave her an IV immediately because she was dehydrated, and also to stop the vomiting, they gave her drugs for that intravenously. All of that came up to less than, I think it was $1,500 US. Um, I've done, I went into the emergency one time here, and I did a CT, and they wanted to charge me $6,000 with insurance. By the way, that was no insurance either, internet with all of those stuff. So the doctors were very attentive and careful. Now, I want to say this also. Your viewers are going to be like, but which way is it? This was a private hospital, it was private care. I also got to experience the public hospital because my aunt was there for something that she was dealing with. And I was not, when I went to the public hospital the first day we were there, because I went to see my aunt, and I was like, I don't know what's going on here, but this seems kind of, we shouldn't be doing things this way anymore. So when my mom got sick, I was concerned because I was like, I don't know how this is gonna work out. But when we went to the private hospital, I was like, wow, this is really amazing. And the fact that they got so in the US also, I think one of the things that they do is they rule things out. They do one thing, and then they're like, oh well, it wasn't that. So 30 minutes to an hour later, you have to take another test. And then it wasn't that. And then 30 minutes to an hour later, you take another test. They did all the tests at the same time. So they were like, okay, it could be this, this, or this. We're gonna test for all of it up front, and then we'll talk to you afterwards. So they were able to rule things out faster, I think, than things go here a lot of the time. And they didn't do the thing where they send you home half half better. It's like, well, I came here and my son was hurting. So, in the US, they would have just given her the intravenous thing for the nausea and said, okay, well, you're not throwing up anymore. Out of here. They didn't do that. Maybe they felt like they could do all the tests with me, but I didn't want her to have to go back and forth because I was only going to be there for a week and they were staying there longer. And I wanted to make sure that, I left them in good shape also. So that's medical care, which is a huge thing. It was a huge concern for me. The other thing is my mom is legally blind. My dad has Alzheimer's. And my dad is in a stage of Alzheimer's where in the US, he wanders. Like if he gets upset, he just leaves the house and he wanders. And so to get him the level of care in the US would require us to put him into memory care, or have 24-hour care at home if they were by themselves. They live with me. But so if they live by themselves, so that care, the memory care place is 6,000 minimum, and a good place is 10,000 minimum. To have somebody here, not even 24/7, but to have somebody here, 7 days a week, 8 hours a day for both of them would cost us, it's 30,000 hours. So it costs us 5 times as much. It's like $15,000 a month. In Trinidad, I was able to link up with a care agency. My cousin had done some background work for me, and I was looking also while I was up here at different care agencies. I had called the Alzheimer's Association in Trinidad to get some recommendations. I found a caregiver. I found an agency. They brought their caregiver in on the mm, Tuesday or Wednesday. Wednesday, I think it was. Um, that day I went to the bank because I needed to open an account. So the new person was there with both of them. My mom was throwing up from the day before. My dad has Alzheimer's, and so she was able to work with both my parents. Was amazing with both of them, and the cost of care there for both of them is 5 times less than it would cost for them to have the same care here. Um, and this is an interesting thing healthcare is an interesting thing to talk about this. So there's one thing is the medical thing, but the other thing is just human care, like caring about a person. And she really cared for my parents. Trinidad is also small, so it turned out that my cousin's best friend is across the street from her. It was like everybody knows everybody. It just it the culture there is just much different too. People pass through. We have family, so even if you did not have family, people stay in your business, which is not something that I like, but is useful. Like they're just, I think it's nosy, but they're not trying to be nosy. Well, they kind of are, but they just they look out for you, right? They're gonna check on you. They're gonna pass by and see how you're doing, and it's just part of how things are, how life is there. So the care part works out a lot better for them in Trinidad than it does here by far.
I'm so glad that your parents can get the care that they need and that it is so many times less than what you would have to pay in the US for sure. In Trini, is it that you were like mentioning a private hospital? Do you all have universal health care or do you have to pay? Okay, you said yes.
Yeah, we do have universal health care. Um,
Nice.
it's Yeah, and I think it's generally good healthcare. So like basic wellness exams, taking care of even I think obstetric care is good. So having babies there is a good idea. They use nursing homes more than they use hospitals there. So the midwife culture is there even though you're being seen by a doctor. Um because so doctors will not prescribe holistic care, but they're aware of herbs and all of that stuff. So they, hmm, how to say this? They recommend highly.
Yeah.
Like so they I don't think that they can legally prescribe it or according to their license prescribe it, but they highly recommend using different herbs or different different foods to ingest rather than give you something to take, to take your medicine to take care of something.
Yeah.
Um, Again, I think if you're a healthy person, even if you're, you know, even if you have something like diabetes or high blood pressure or something like that that's chronic, but you're managing it, you should be fine. You'll do very well with the healthcare there. And the other thing is your lifestyle is so much healthier because you're walking a lot more.
Right,
You're
right.
in fresh air a lot more. You cannot escape it. Life is easier a lot more. So on Sundays, it's like nothing happening, but you can relax a lot more. Um, it just it invites a more active life because you socially it's better for you because you're connected with people. Emotionally, that works out better. And so it just lends itself to a healthier way of living. Don't go live up on a hill somewhere though, because you're gonna have to walk down that hill every day. And then you think that you could get a car, and soon you'll be driving everywhere, and then you'll be living like an American. So you don't want to do that.
Oh my God, Nneka, when you were talking, I just like closed my eyes and I envisioned a low key life, walking places, the fresh air. It sounds really good. It sounds
Yeah.
pretty amazing. Could you tell us about what the water quality is like? Do people have to buy water bottles? Do you all use like a filter system or can you just use the water from the tap?
Mm-mm. I think you can use the water from the tap.
Okay,
I didn't have any issue with that.
perfect.
I'm a bottled water person in general. See.
Exactly. Yes, bottled water. Bottled water make that world go round.
For the convenience of it, but no, the water quality is fine. And Trinidad's infrastructure is really good, except for the roads. But
Okay.
The infrastructure is really good. The electricity is really good. Water quality is very good. Wi-Fi internet is very good. It's a fairly um technologically progressive place. I wouldn't say advanced, but definitely progressive. Um, and so the conveniences are there. Growing up, we had a lot of blackouts, um,
Oh.
but that's not an issue now in today's world. Not at all.
Got it. Okay. Well, that
Yeah.
water quality definitely matters. As you know, there are some places in the US where the water quality is not that good, or other
Mm.
places where you have to have water bottles, they have to have a filtration system. So it's good to know that in Trini, you wouldn't have to worry about that. Well, now that we talked about water, let's talk about that food, Inika. What do that food
Mm,
do? Like, what are some typical dishes that people would eat there? Are there options for people that are vegetarian or vegan? Is it mainly like meat based? What would you say about that food?
mm. The food is good,
The food is good.
bar none. The food is great. Also Trinidad, I don't know if your viewers would know this, but Trinidad is half, well, now it's about a third African, a third Indian, and a third mixed up of people. And so because there are a lot of Indians there, um, there are Hindus, Muslims, Hindus. So because of that, there's a lot of vegetarian way of eating. Um, I would say everybody knows about doubles from the outside, but you can have like pilau, you could have corn soup. Corn soup is completely vegetarian unless you put some meat in it, but you don't have to. Even if you're eating a roti, you could have with chana and pumpkin and other vegetables. There are fritters that have a lot of greens and bhaji or dasheen bush, which is like mm, bhaji is like spinach, both of them. We substituted with spinach here or collard greens, maybe.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of greens, a lot of the food. If you're eating like a Trinidadian, a lot of the food is root vegetables. We use a lot of root vegetables for starches rather than um, pasta or
Mm,
flour. So we'll eat dasheen, we'll eat breadfruit is not a root vegetable, but it's still it's a plant. We'll eat cassava, eddos, things that come out of the ground and are grown. Um, we might do some flour, but the things in Trinidad are made, right? For the most part, still they're made. They've started to do a lot of packaging of things to make it convenient and to give access to people, to Trinidadians who are abroad. But in Trinidad, people cook. Even the street vendors are cooking the food there. And so it's fresh food that is grown and not adulterated. Like the chickens are smaller because it's a backyard chicken. So it's been running around free range its whole life.
No, that makes sense. And I know you said that like the outside world, all we know about is doubles, but I got you that roti. I had that too. And like you said,
Mhm.
it had a lot of vegetables in it. And then the fritter, yes,
Mhm.
very good. Yes, cassava
Yes.
also very good. So I got some other
We
things that
have
are
some
good.
like corn soup just has corn and dumplings and some provision. We call it provision with vegetable in it. Um, Callaloo is just basically some vegetable soup, basically. Um, Pilau is rice and peas, but you get the idea.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. I think I remember that too, like on a menu. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
the
that's
food is
good.
very diverse and it has spices. That's the other thing about Trinidadian cooking is so here we know herbs and people might make a green smoothie with all these things, right? But we cook with ginger and turmeric um and culantro and all the herbs that people that you pick off and then you put in a salad or you the food isn't like that. The nutrients are built into how you cook the food. So you don't have to have a salad separately or drink a green smoothie separately. It's in the spices and the way that they make the food, that the way that the food is cooked. So
Love
it's
that.
baked in there. Yeah.
Love that, Nneka. Love that. Would agree. Definitely had no problem when I was there trying to find vegetarian options. So yeah,
Hmm.
and like you talked about that spice too. There's always like something where you could like add a little bit more if you wanted to be a little bit spicier. So that's really good. I want to go back to a previous comment that you made when you said that the demographics are African. You said then it was Indian and then it's a mix. What would
Hmm.
you say that that mix is?
It's the African and Indian mix.
It's the
And then,
African Indian mix.
so in years past, it was maybe like 50% African, 30% Indian, and then like 10% or 15% African Indian mix, which you call Dogla. And then like 5% of Chinese, um, Syrian, European, just of a smattering of people, Spanish. But now today's demographics, it's like a third, a third, a third of people, a third Africa of African descent, a third of East Indian descent from India, and a third of mixed people.
Mixed people. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So the question I'm just curious about is like sometimes there are some countries, for example, that some African countries that might lean right into Africanism as like a piece of their national identity. Like this is an African nation, or we might find some countries in Latin America that might identify as like a mixed race nation. Do
Mm.
you feel like there is a national identity for people that are from Trini that's related to their racial group or more of like a melting pot?
Um, I think it's more of a melting pot. I say this, Trinidadians are Trinidadians. First.
Trinidadian first.
We are definitely Trinidadians are Trinidadians. In recent years, probably I would say the last 10 years, there's been a lot of trying to identify as African or Indian. And I don't even know why, because really now, like a third of the country is mixed completely. Like you can't tell.
Wow. Wow.
But
Wow.
because I think the cultural history of Trinidad has been first there were the indigenous people who were living there like thousands of years before Christopher Columbus landed. And so they have a strong presence. My great grandmother was Caribbean, um, completely. And so there was that. And then there were the Spanish, and then there was the French, and then there was the English. And then and the they brought in enslaved people. The so they were the Africans. And then after slavery was abolished, they brought in the Indians as indentured laborers, and so the Indians came. And then they brought in the Chinese as indentured laborers. So there was a little bit of Chinese there. And so now this is one thing that I wish Trinidadians would do more of is just like it's a lot of different people. And up until recently, there it leaned much more Trinidadian than it leaned I'm African or I'm Indian. Now I say that, and I also say that my parents grew up during the Black Power movement, and so that generation is very African conscious. You know, Stokely Carmichael came out of Trinidad here to work with SNCC here. There were a lot of Trinidadian born people who were part of the Black Power movement in the US, and then vice versa too. We were heavily influenced in Trinidad as a reverse. Um, my family gave us African names for our heritage. Eric Williams was very, very clear that he wanted Trinidad to be an independent, non-tourist country. Like he did not want Trinidadians to be beholden to anyone for their well-being. But it's very nuanced. So I would say this. I used to say this all the time that Trinidadians of African descent have been the way that white Americans are here. We have had that level of privilege in Trinidad. We were the ones that ran the politics of the country for a very long time. The first prime minister was of African descent and really made things, it catered to people of African descent.
Mm.
And I think this is what caused the new thing in the last 10 years, because after Eric Williams, then because Indians in Trinidad were the way that Black Americans are here, not to that significant descent, significant, not that much, but the power in the country, I would say, the political power in the country favored people of African descent for a very long time in its beginning. Trinidad just was um, became independent in the 60s, and so when it became, it hasn't been an independent country for a very long time. And for the early its beginning years, it was very African. It catered to people of African descent, which of course caused resentment with people of Indian descent because they were there also. They helped build the country. They were indentured laborers. And so then when they got a chance to have political power, they flipped the tables, and then the people of African descent weren't happy. And now in recent times, now it's a conversation about, oh, the Indians are doing this, or the Black people are doing that, or the Indians are doing, and it's like, well, y'all were doing this for quite some time
Yeah.
before. And so I think they're getting out of it now a lot. But there was a time, there were a few years there in between where I was like, I don't know why we're having these conversations about being so racial, because we should not take that on as a country. We need to be the country that is everybody, because like I said, it's a third now, and very soon it's going to be 25, 25, 50. That's mixed, right? And so people need to approach it as such and work together to make the country a bigger country. In the past also, the people of African descent have had political power. They're the ones that had the government jobs. They're the ones that got the banking jobs. But people of Indian descent have economic power in Trinidad. And so, and it's mixing a lot now too. But that was the way that the power structure was set up there. And so we've the country has had to move through that kind of growing up. It's just growing up.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that history to my channel. I didn't mean for you to like run through the whole history of Trini, but you did a really wonderful job and I feel like that's very helpful to kind of understand where we are today in the way that people are identifying and to understand the demographics of the country and not to be confused by that. You
Mm,
mentioned that your family was like it was important for them to name you all in certain ways. I just want you to know I love your name.
mm.
Nneka, I think is beautiful. Does it have a meaning? If it doesn't, that is fine. Just
It
curious.
does. It means mother is greater. It should
Okay.
really be pronounced Nneka. It's not Nigerian name. Shout
Wow.
out to all my Nigerian. Nneka is a very popular name in Nigeria. I come to learn. But yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay, friend, I'm going to bring us back. We went really deep into the history. I'm going to go back to like some light conversations to wrap it up. Could you tell us a little bit about what the transportation is like in Trini?
Mm. Well, I mentioned the car situation.
You did.
I think for the most part, you can get around with public transportation. By public transportation, I mean taxis and what they call maxi taxis there. They're these vans with they have stripes on them that indicate the region in which they operate. So like the yellow one operates in the northwest, the red one operates in the east. I don't know what the other colors are because I've not used them.
It's okay. It's
It's
okay.
pretty simple to navigate like that. If you want door to door, you could get a private taxi, or you could probably get. They don't have Uber there. They have something else. I did not take the public transportation, but I grew up taking public transportation. It's very easy, and things are close, so you can walk a lot of places. Like it's it's not it's and it's like walking in New York, you know.
Okay.
It's if you're living in a certain area, if like if you're living in the Northwest or if you're living in like Trinity or Tunapuno, somewhere that's Shogunas, if that's somewhere that's built up, you can walk to places very easily.
That's perfect. Okay, so you talked about walking to places easily. Are there pharmacies around? Like, let's say you had like a medical condition, you need to get a gauze, something just happened. Could you easily walk to a pharmacy and get that?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's pharmacies everywhere. Yeah.
We love to hear it.
I'm like pharmacy? Yeah. And the drugs aren't the drugs are easily available also.
At the
The
pharmacy,
medication.
like over the counter?
A lot of so some of the things that you have to have a prescription for here, you don't have to have a prescription for there. Um,
Mm,
and then the prescriptions aren't expensive either. So from my mom's visit to the doctor, to the hospital, she had a prescription. She had two prescriptions to fill, and they were I think it was like $2 maybe. I don't want to lie, but it was not a lot.
it was not a lot. That's all we need to know.
It
That's
was
all we
not a
know.
lot.
It's
Yeah.
not a lot. What is like an example, like you said, something you would need for a prescription here, but they're like, "It's fine."
Like antibiotics
Okay,
is a
yeah,
good
that's fair.
example.
That's a
At
great
certain
example.
levels and dosages, yeah, it just it works a little bit differently there.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
good. That's good to know. Just in case things happen, we never know. It'd be nice to be able to access things, or I know people that need certain medications all the time, so they have to go and figure out, like, what would that medication be in another country, and can they get access to that?
Yeah, and the pharmacists are knowledgeable also. So, and they talk to you. I get drugs filled here. First of all, I think in the US now, if you get drugs filled at a pharmacy, they never expect that. They're like, why aren't you using your mail-in pharmacy or something else?
Mm,
So if you get to a pharmacy, that's one thing, but you can't talk to the pharmacist to get any information.
yeah.
I was like, "Oh wow, you're just gonna give me this stuff? You're not gonna ask about any interactions or anything?" No, they're the pharmacists. You know that they talk to us. They were like, "Okay, you need to take it this way," even though the directions were there, right? This is how you need to take it. Or if you're taking this, you can't take it with that. So they were very helpful. Again, the care they may not have all the fancy whatever, but the care is amazing. And they're very knowledgeable too. And they study their craft. Like it's just it's just different.
That's really great. That's really great. Okay, friend, we have come to our final
Oh
question for
wow.
today. Our final question is, can you tell us about the beaches?
Ah, oh, the beaches. I wish I had gone. This is probably the thing I have the least to say.
Oh, no. I know that I went
I
to
I think I just take the water for granted in Trinidad. Go ahead and say what you what you were gonna say.
I was gonna say I went to Maracas Bay, and I think you mentioned Maracas Bay, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. It's Maracas is a regular lime. It's popular. That's where they send everybody. Uh, yes, they have the bacon shack. You get to drive over the hills. It's very picturesque to get there, and it's a good lime. Growing up, we used to go to the beach every Saturday morning.
Wow.
My grandfather used to drive us, and me and my cousins and my brother. And so I think I just take the beach for granted.
Yeah,
We used to go to the Shagaramas, which is they've built up Shagaramas now. But when I used to go there, it was like a lot of rocks and but it was a nice beach to
yeah.
get to. It was just a short drive. It was like, 10 minutes from our house, not the half an hour that it takes to get over to Maracas. Also, Maracas has a lot of mudslides, and so it was dicey if it was gonna rain. You didn't want to go there. So yeah, the beaches are beautiful and readily available and can sometimes be taken for granted.
They can. We all are taking some for granted where we live, trust. We are
Hmm.
all taking things for granted. When you are around the space in Trini, do you often interact with expats a lot, or are there like locals and then the expats like live in specific areas with each other?
Mm, so it depends on what type of expat you're talking about. If you, I think there are a lot of expats in Trinidad who are there to work. Um, so they're like, there are a lot of a lot affiliated with the oil industry. So they live down south. Um, there are expats that come there as consultants with, say, Capgemini or something like that, or Price Waterhouse Coopers, and they do live in certain areas. They usually live in Shagaramas. They live in One Woodward Place. They live down south if they're in the oil industry. Um, but I can't. When I was there, I couldn't tell the expats from the Trinidadians. Mm, yeah, my experience with expats is that they go to different schools also because in Trinidad, secondary schools you have to take an exam to go to you have to pass for a secondary school. So
Mm.
the good ones, right? And so their kids don't go to our secondary schools; they go to um, international schools or whatever. The U.S. school or the international school there. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, because I know like some places expats have like taken over a whole area and you go somewhere and you like don't see local people at all and they've like pushed local people out of the area. And then in other ones, it's like everybody's kind of living together. It might be hard to even find some expats in some areas. So I just wondered.
Yeah, Trinidadians would never allow that.
There you have it, as they
They
shouldn't.
they tried. They tried in West Warrens. I think they may have attempted to do something like that in West Warrens. It doesn't work.
Doesn't-
We're very proud people.
Yeah.
One thing that we didn't talk about was the economics in Trinidad. We have our economy doesn't depend on tourism again because of Eric Williams. We have oil money, we have other exports, rum, Angostura bitters. There are other things that we trade, and so we have a chip on our shoulder. There's a certain air that you can probably hear it while I'm talking to you too. So yeah, Trinidadians would never allow that. Even if they attempt to do something like that, like they have a lot of gated communities. They have a lot of high end communities, Champlain, um, Victoria Gardens, West Mornings, that I as I was saying. But there's nothing that is non-Trinidadian in Trinidad. Absolutely not.
Love that, girl. I love that. That is good news. Happy to know that. Well, Nneka, that is the end of our time. Is there anything else that you wanted to say to the followers, like a last thing for Trini? Anything that came to your mind that you didn't get to mention? It's your time.
Well, I want to say come outside of Carnival. Trinidad, the other thing is there's always a party going on in Trinidad. There we celebrate Hindu festivals, Muslim festivals, Christian festivals. And just because we want to celebrate, the last weekend was Shelter Baptist and Eid, or 2 weekends ago. The weekend of Eid was Shelter Baptist or Spiritual Baptist Day and Eid in the same weekend. So they got both days, 2 days off and celebrated both, right? So I would say if you're really interested in Trinidad as a place to live, come outside of Carnival and experience it then and really, really enjoy it. Do not think that you're going to get Trinidadians out of the way though. Like you can come there and be a Trinidadian, but don't, not the other way around.
We not trying to do that. That is great though. That's so cool that you all celebrate so many different types of holidays. And would you say the person that is of that like racial or ethnic group is the only one celebrating or like everybody?
No, it's the whole country.
Okay, that's
The
what's
whole country
up.
celebrates it.
We
Yeah.
love to see it.
We celebrate Diwali. We celebrate Eid. I told you the Spiritual Baptist Day. We celebrate Emancipation Day and Indian Arrival Day and Independence. And yeah, it's just, and for everyone, the country celebrates. You always have a friend who is of that ethnicity or of that religion or of that background that is celebrating. And so you just go with their family and have a good time. You learn the culture that way too.
Yes, yes. And that's something that I have thought about, you know, across the world is how great it would be if we celebrated everybody's
Hmm.
holidays, you know, not just like leaning to one particular group's holidays, but if everybody got a chance and like you said, we could learn so much about other people with that too.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do. That's
Inuka,
true.
it's been so great to have you on the channel. Oh my God, you brought so much expertise to us today because we have been talking on this channel. I know you know. We've had some conversations about Trini, so we had to bring in an expert to let us know about the country.
Thank you. It was wonderful to be here.
Yeah, it was so great.
Yeah.
I actually, forgive me, friend, I have one more question. It's a really quick question.
Hmm.
So, a lot of times we talk about Trinidad, but there also is Tobago. And
Hmm.
so, could you, as our wrap up question, like tell us maybe not necessarily like what's the difference, but like we should be going to Trinidad and also be visiting Tobago, which is going to be a different experience than what Trinidad is by itself?
Very different. So
Okay.
my apologies to people, to Tibetanians. Um, this is a very Trinidadian problem, and I should not be like this. As somebody from Trinidad and Tobago, let me get that straight. So Tobago is more laid back, if you could imagine. Trinidad is a commercial center. It's an industrial center. The capital is very hustly. Like I said, it's kind of like a New York, Miami kind of aspiration. Even in South Trinidad, it's they've built it up so that it's still commercial, and there's a certain pace to it. It's kind of like a soca, like a Marshall Montano soca pace to it. And Tobago is more like a David Ruther calypso type, like a a milder rapso calypso type of laid back kind of feel. So both of them have a lot of space, a lot of community, a lot of enjoyment of life. Trinidad is more party, Tobago is more relaxed. Yeah.
Perfect. That is a perfect way to end it. No need to apologize. I should have asked you that. That should have been question 1. I
Yeah.
completely forgot and it came into my mind and I was like, that was a thing that happened to us, Nneka, is that when we were there for Carnival, we only went to Trinidad. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh, so we actually didn't go to Tobago, but some people I knew went there after. And so I just want to make that known that, these are two different, even though they are
The same country.
same country, we got two different like pieces of that same country.
Hmm. Hmm. Definitely.
Oh, wonderful. Well, that is the conclusion of our conversation today. Thank you for being the first feature on my channel.
Oh my goodness. Yay.
Yes,
Thank you for
yay.
having me. Thank you.
It was my pleasure.
Sure.
And yeah, look forward to seeing you all later. I am going to link Nneka's channel in the description box. So if you want to follow Nneka's content, she also has another video on Trinidad that I will also link so that you all can keep up with what Nneka is doing.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, friend.